Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas. I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan, and your host today. It is a pleasure to have you with us and to have you on our Lunch and Learn, the Positive Psychology Hour. This is a series that we do in partnership with the Whole Being Institute, and it's curated by Phoebe Atkinson. Today, we're going to be talking about Metaphor Mirror Part 2, Embodying Our Future Selves with Sense Metaphor, with Melissa Johnson Carissimo. She's zooming in all the way from Genoa, Italy. And today we're going to talk about when we say, how are you? And it's a tough question to answer and very well is kind of out of reach. Metaphor can actually help us. In Metaphor Mirror Part 2, we'll use metaphor affect processing, or MAP, and the intuitive neurological magic of sense metaphor to explore the feeling of our feelings and embody our best answers for 2022. MAP was developed and researched in cancer and psychiatric treatment centers and as an introspection and communication tool to support well-being for patients and reduce burnout for healthcare workers. So today in this interactive session, you'll be guided in the creation of your own metaphor mirrors and their revisions. And through a fanciful Q&A, these naturally poetic self-reports will emerge gently and gradually and automatically. We're going to activate our intuition, suspend analysis, generate perspective, and stimulate deep empathetic listening to ourselves and to others. And you don't need to have taken Metaphor Part 1 to enjoy and participate today. A little bit about our presenter, Melissa Johnson Carissimo, is a counselor trained in Carl Rogers' person-centered approach, and of course, also a Whole Being Institute certified positive psychology coach. As we mentioned before, she's the creator of Metaphoric Affect Processing, or MAP, and this interview process is designed to facilitate the intuitive introspection and non-analytical expression of difficult feelings while mitigating counterproductive thought patterns common to states of anxiety and depression. So that's why we thought it would be perfect for this time in 2022 as we enter almost the conclusion of 2 years of the pandemic. Melissa's based in Genoa and New York City. She leads MAP training internationally for individuals and groups. And we'll put in the chat when we open it. It's closed right now because we want to go into our intuitive mind. We'll put in how you can reach her at the end of the presentation. I'm going to bring Melissa on so she can begin. Thanks for joining us, Melissa.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you, Caroline. I think I'm hoping that you have seen in Part 1 how much I love sharing this material. So thank you for having me.
It's like nothing else I've ever done before. So if you're here for the very first time, everyone, you're in for a treat. And if you're here for Part 2, let the magic continue.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. Today, I want to share an adventure with you. And it begins with 2 questions and the distinction between them. And the questions are very, very simple, but the consequences for our sense of well-being when we use these questions to look at our feelings, the consequences are very, very different. And I'm going to invite you with a pen and paper, which I hope you will have present throughout our hour together, because together with me, you'll be creating your own poetic reflections called metaphor mirrors of your feelings. On that piece of paper with your pencil now, I'd like for you to answer this question with just a word or two, the way you might answer a friend who asks you this question on the street. How are you? And the second question is this one. What color are you in this moment? What are the feelings and their color in this moment? The distinction between these two questions has pretty much powered a decade-long exploration for me that still feels as though it's really only just begun. And we're going to begin looking at the difference between those two things. I want you to notice as you asked yourself, how are you? And as you asked yourself, what color are you? How very, very different those two questions felt. And how interesting it is that your answer to the color question really contains so much more than the rational answer to how are you. These are representative of the fundamental difference between two thinking modes that we all have. One is rational, and the other is intuitive. And when we activate the intuitive thinking mode, which is what we did with what color are you, we're answering the question about how we're feeling directly from the gut. And we're doing it bypassing our rational brain. And we're expanding our sense of perspective, that take that we're getting on our feelings when we identify them as a color. Cognitive linguists Lakoff and Johnson, who developed something called cognitive metaphor theory, talk about metaphor as a phenomenon, as an actual happening, in which we actually experience one thing in terms of another. We're actually getting an experience of our feelings that is embodied when we answer the question, how, instead of how are you, when we answer the question, what color are you? I share this with you just as a shout out to the multidisciplinary nature of this approach and all of the different perspectives that I've explored in these last 10 years as I've been trying to figure out how come it is that this process has been so effective. We're touching on fields from positive psychology and cognitive linguistics to behavioral economics and mindfulness and narrative medicine and neurolinguistics and burnout assessment and person-centered psychology. There's a lot of stuff in there, and at the end of the presentation, you'll see a way that you can be in touch with me if you'd like to look into more of those fields and those concepts. The most important concept for me right in the beginning, when I was working with cancer patients and psychiatric patients and discovering that kind of catch-all question, how are you, which could also be what's happening, tell me about how you're feeling, why are you down today, how are you today, was so often being met with a kind of response that was not productive often. It was triggering a rational kind of thinking process, and what we were getting was very, very different from the what color are you question. In this rational mode, so often what would happen was my interlocutor would find him or herself kind of inside the container of his or her feelings, which is kind of a risky place to be, much more than looking at the landscape of one's feelings. The bucolic sense was much more sudsy and tumultuous and very difficult position from which to identify individual feelings and share them verbally. What was so often happening with the rational question was that we were kind of triggering a sort of cyclical thinking, a kind of one thought following another, a sort of ruminative thinking pattern, and it was ultimately counterproductive for the person, no matter what kind of empathy the listening was offering. John Kabat-Zinn and his mindfulness approach has been really influential in my thinking about this process. the nature of the attention given to our thoughts, this one thought following another, which is what negative thinking process can be, so much like a drop of water down a hill, where one follows another and creates a deeper and deeper sort of neurological groove as we proceed with the negative path, can be really hard to interrupt. Mark Williams at Oxford, with his mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, showed us with his work on suicidality and associative thinking how this actually works neurologically. And what I found in psychiatry and oncology was that there was a very simple way of actually interrupting this sort of negative thought track, and that was the "what color are you" question that very naturally was knocking people off of the rational thinking track and actually allowing them to step outside in a metacognitive way of that washing machine emotional container and look in a metacognitive way at their feelings. As John Teasdale, another of the founders of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, talks about our goal not being to directly change feelings, but to change our relationship to them, which is what this process is all about. What we're looking at with metaphoric affect processing is how can we talk about our feelings, our bad feelings, when we're feeling bad, without feeling worse. And the answer to that question is finding words for our feelings that do not engage the rational mind. And that's what we're doing now in part 2. And what I'm wondering from you all is, 1 month in to this 2022, where are we in regard to this year? And where do we want to be? That's what we're going to be looking at today with metaphoric affect processing. This is a process that we're going to use to identify, verbalize, regulate, and transform our emotions actually as metaphor. And it's a 5-step process which involves framing, perception, description, and then commentary and revision. In part 1, we focused mostly on the framing, perception, and description. Today, the 4th and 5th aspects will be what we really focus on. And it's going to allow for a kind of transformation that I'm looking forward to sharing with you. The framing part of this process is choosing what to look at, what to focus on. And it's a process we use to focus on difficulties. I'm going to give you our title. And so again, with pen and paper ready, what you can put at the top of your papers as the topic of our exploration is 2022. 1 month in to 2022, I'd like for you to write down perhaps what you already answered at the top of the hour, which was, what color are you right now in relation to the month that has just passed of 2022? And go ahead and write that at the top of your page. Here's an example of what it will look like with you filling in that blank. And I invite you to really use metaphor here as a sensory lens. You're really looking at it to scan the landscapes of your feeling right now with regard to your title, which is 2022. And let that feeling emerge. Just use a word or two, and let your identification of that color be such that I might recognize it if I saw it on the street. The nature of the color, the tone of it, the hues, the saturation. Let me know really what color that is a match for how you're feeling right now with relation to 2022. This is the use of sense metaphor. And the way you're coming up with each one of your answers is to feel the resonance. You'll know when you have the match by the way it feels inside. And it's interesting. You may scroll through some options. Orange? No, it's not orange. Blue? Not quite blue. Ah, it has a little more green in it. That's it. That's the color. And you'll know. And it's almost a physical sensation, the resonance of your match. Here's the next question. With regard to 2022, what sound are your feelings? And here's what that line of your text will look like. I am the sound of. And your third question, always with regard to 2022, to the touch I am. If you can hold those feelings in your hands or put your hands up against those feelings and it's there under your fingertips, what does it feel like to the touch? The next question is, with relation to 2022, what animal are you? And what is that animal doing in this moment? These are your feelings with relation to 2022. What animal are they? Again, there's no need to be writerly. You're just identifying the match. You're actually using metaphor as a perceptive sense. We recognize it as a descriptive tool, ubiquitous as a descriptive tool. You're using it now as a sense of actual perception. This is the last question. With regard to 2022, your feelings about 2022, they're a movement or emotion. What movement are they? And at this point, you'll have something that looks like this. I am a color, I am a sound. To the touch, I'm a tactile sensation. I'm an animal somewhere doing something. I'm a movement or motion. And this is an externalization, a text that actually reflects your feelings in this moment as metaphor. I think of it as kind of an emotional hologram. I am fascinated by the fact that it can be so clear to my poets what color they actually are in that moment, what color their feelings are, that it can be so dynamic and present and clear is fascinating to me. And what metaphor allows us to do is actually automatically, with a kind of effortlessness, have an eloquence about our feelings in an automatic way. So we're not searching for the words for our feelings. They are emerging and are eloquent. This is your metaphor mirror, what you have just created. Again, this reflection is as automatic as one's reflection in a mirror. You don't have to make it, it's just there when you look. And that's what we've done for ourselves. And I'd love for you to just take a moment to feel the sensation of having produced that document. And you're going to have a chance to share those with each other in a breakout in a few minutes. In a locked psychiatric ward here in Genoa at Ospedale Galliera, working with this process just up to this point was something that was producing for patients a really interesting effect. Patients were experiencing not necessarily a shift in their identifying struggle with anxiety or depression or other, but they were developing after this process um, a greater sense of peace with regard to the feelings. And that's that piece that we were looking at when we mentioned Teasdale, that shift, not necessarily of the feelings, but of our relationship to them, which opens up our sense of perspective and gives us space to look at the feelings in a different way. What I'd like to do now is share one more piece of this with you on a neurological note. This is my little guy. That's his little brain. And those two yellow dots are the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. And this is a spot, an address in our brain identified by Matthew Lieberman, University of California, who saw that this same spot that is triggered when we symbolically represent our feelings is the area in the brain that lights up when we experience positive emotion. And this is one of the things that excited me when I came upon this research as another possible explanation for why this work with metaphor can be so effective. Another thing that's happening as we work with this is a certain quality of listening takes place that you're going to be able to experience when we do the breakout. The use of sense metaphor as a perceptor as well as a descriptor, together with the way in which we are listening and receiving these texts, this sensory reception that you'll recognize as embodied creates for us a sort of intrinsic empathy. The quality of empathy, the quality of listening is really intrinsic to the process. And now I'm going to invite us to listen to the creation of a revision of this text that we've created, and I'm going to ask a volunteer to come forward as we begin. Hi, Nancy. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me for this process. Can you unmute so that we can hear you?
Hear me?
There you are. I can hear you. Hi. Thanks,
Thank
Nancy.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, you were so great in part one, so thank you for coming back for part two. What we're going to do, Nancy, before we begin the work on this text that we've all just created, what we've done is bring everybody up to the point that we ended our part one at. And what I'd like for you to do for us is recite, if you can, the metaphor mirror that you just created, and we'll all listen and we'll experience your feelings about 2022 to date.
Okay. 2022, 1 month in. I am a clear, bright, light blue, sort of like the Mediterranean with sun shining through it. I'm the sounds of harp strings being gently pulled and reverberating. I am warm and soft and comfy. I'm a kitten arching my back and stretching. I'm like a scarf swishing through the air in continuous S's falling into a puddle.
Wow. Wow. Tell me, Nancy, is there a line in that work that surprised you? And I'm asking everyone else that same question. in the text that you created, was there a line that you weren't anticipating? What surprised you?
I, so the bright blue
Hmm.
immediately was like, I sort of did a double take when
Hmm.
that came in, and I sat with the blue for a moment and sort of felt the light coming through it.
Uh-huh. So a kind of a transparency. This blue had light in it.
But it was the brightness that hit me.
The
That
brightness.
yeah, the original brightness. I was sort of taken aback by that.
Yeah, yeah. This is one of the effects of this work. It often surprises us in a way that our answering the question, how are you, typically does not. What color are you? Produces things that we don't already know. I had begun to share this slide with everyone a few minutes ago. As we listen to these metaphor mirrors and as we go into to notice the kinds of choices that we made to describe our feelings, these are the things that are really important not to do as we go through these things. What we're on purpose not doing is analyzing. We're not asking ourselves why we came up with these answers. We're not interpreting them or coming up with stories about them. This is all in order to keep ourselves on that rational or off of that rational thinking track and keep ourselves on the intuitive track, which will allow us to get closer to our feelings in that resonant and surprising way without entrenching the negative thought processes. Nancy, now we're going to take that text, and everyone at home will do the same thing. We're going to take the text that we just created, and we're going to begin to work with it in a way that our own sense of emotion will begin to reflect the text as we revise it. And what I'm going to ask you to do, Nancy, and I'm going to follow along with you here. Um, First, let me show you this. We're going to begin to create what's called a revision. And the first line of that revision is, and I am also. And then I'm going to ask you all to follow along with me, answering my questions. Nancy, now you no longer need to write anything down. I'm going to make notes for you, and this is the process as it can be at its most powerful. Because you won't be writing anything down, Nancy, you'll have the opportunity to really stay with what you're feeling, as opposed to having to kind of toggle back and forth between the cognitive, rational self and the intuitive self. You just let your answers emerge, and I invite everyone else to do the same thing as you all rather write down your responses. So here we are with, and I am also. And Nancy, we'll go back to your color, and everyone can begin with the colors that they came up with. This is still our same title, which is in regard to 2022, and we're moving forward now from our colors to a revision, moving toward our best self for 2022. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I was getting ahead of myself. So what I'd like you all to do is be in touch for a moment with this for the purposes of our revision. Be in touch with, from this 1 month into 2022, looking ahead, be in touch with what that best self would be. And Nancy, I'm going to ask you to help me begin by looking at your text, begin with the line that was most challenging for you. Is there a line in the first mirror that you created that most represents a discomfort, or you're the furthest away you are from your fullest sense of well-being?
And I think it was that first line about the clear, bright, light blue.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and the clarity of that, when you put the phrase, I'm also,
Uh-huh.
what came to mind was hesitant. And
Hmm.
the hesitant doesn't sit with the clear, bright, light blue. And so
Interesting.
that was the sort of
Okay.
disconnect, I think.
Okay. So let me ask you this. I would like everyone to circle or identify in some way that aspect of your first text that you really have to change in order to move toward your best self for 2022. So identifying that for yourselves, answer this question. Where to begin a shift toward your best self for 2022. Nancy, what does that color have to become?
Maybe less sharp and bright and a little paler and softer. So to get to the bright blue, I need some gentler blue.
Okay,
So maybe,
I'm going to
um,
stop you. I'm going to
okay,
stop you.
stop
And
thinking.
I'll just tell you why. Because we begin to tell stories. It's so much our natural tendency to begin to explain, to wonder why, and to provide answers. And that's what we are not doing for the purpose of this exercise. And then you're welcome to go away with your texts and analyze the heck out of them. But while we're here doing metaphoric affect processing, we're really staying just with the feeling of it without any kind of analysis and really staying with the resonance of it. So we've gotten to, we've gotten now to sound. As you continue to make this shift toward your better self, your best self for 2022, as you have connection with this feeling that's less sharp and bright, that's paler and softer and gentler, what sound, what sound is this feeling making for you?
It's more of a tinkle. Um,
Okay.
Tinkle is what.
Okay. And everyone else following along? Now, Nancy, letting go of the color, letting go of the sound, this new feeling as you're shifting toward your best self sensation for 2022. You're holding this feeling in your hands again, and you've got your fingertips on it. You can really feel it with your fingertips. What is that feeling to the touch?
It's harder. It's my fingers aren't smushing through it. It's stronger. Um, like there is resistance, but resistance that allows me not to collapse into it. I feel like I'm pushing my fingers and something's helping hold my fingers.
Hmm. Okay. This same feeling, again, letting go of the sensations preceding, this same feeling is an animal shifting toward your best self in 2022. What's the animal?
It's a cat again, but it's ready to pounce. So it's in a ready, it's getting ready to pounce.
Okay. Last question. This feeling is a movement or emotion. What movement is this feeling?
I'm rolling down a hill and it's getting faster and faster and faster as I get towards the bottom.
This is your revision. You've just created your metaphor mirror in revision, and I'd like to read it to you, if I may. And I am also less sharp and bright, paler and softer, gentler. I'm a tinkle, to the touch harder, not smushing through it. There is resistance helping hold my fingers. I'm a cat ready to pounce. I'm rolling down a hill faster and faster. I see you smiling. That's lovely and not unusual. Can you tell me just right in this moment what you're feeling? Yeah.
Anticipation, like I'm getting ready to jump.
Yeah.
Like I'm sitting and I want to stand up.
Yeah. That it looks like receiving this this revision, this recitation has really energized you. I
Yeah.
see, yeah.
It feels it. I absolutely feel the energy.
That's that's wonderful. What has just happened here, what we've done here is we've moved from one place to another in this way. So often being inside our feelings, and what you began with was not a negative scenario. But so often inside our feelings, negative or not, it's not easy to see where we're at. And what this kind of a process, what looking at our feelings metaphorically allows us to do, is to move out for a moment from the trees, so to speak. We get a little bit further up the valley, and we can see where it is that we want to go. So often, when we're in that forest of our feelings, we can't even imagine what the goal might be. It can be impossible to see where it is that we want to go. Experiencing the resonance of this intuitively discovered reflection of our feelings and reflection of where we'd like to move with our feelings that has been embodied, we actually reflect during the period that we're creating this revision. We're actually reflecting that change of feeling, and that gives us a sense of where we want to go. I would now like for you guys, all of you, to be able to move into breakout rooms. Caroline, can we do that now so that you all have a chance to
Sure.
read to each other, to recite to each other these texts that you've created? Your first mirror, followed by your second mirror. I'd like to give you about 10 minutes if that's possible. I think we saw last time that our poets really appreciated the opportunity to share the feelings, the texts, and then for each of you to really just share a word or two with your breakout peers about what the feeling is of having, what that felt like to reflect your feelings and then reflect the change, what that process felt like for you. Again, without analysis, without explaining why. And one of the things that's interesting also about this process is that when we're reflecting a difficulty that we want to explore and aren't identifying the title for our poets, it's not necessary, even as you're sharing your texts, to share details of the problem itself. And the process is equally effective, whether or not you want to disclose the difficulties that you're exploring, which makes it also valuable in that way. Okay,
About how many per room? 4 to
I
5?
would say 4 to 5, even three, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 3 would
And we
be
had
the
one
minimum.
question, I think.
Yeah,
Someone raised their hand.
yeah.
Um, if you can't participate in the breakout rooms, um, just stay in the main room, everyone, and
Um,
we'll create that. Does
sure.
that sound okay, Melissa?
Sure. I'd also like to invite you, if you're here on the phone or can't participate, it's also really powerful to just listen. So I invite you to participate as a listener. The quality of empathy is really strong, and being able to be a witness to others' feelings is very powerful also for who's sharing. So
Stay in your room for a little while. If no one is there with you, don't worry, I will move you. And you do need to accept the room. Yeah? So let me just do that. I'm going to go ahead and open all rooms. Off you go. Do accept.
are you here with me, Caroline?
Yes, let me just stop the recording and I'm just um, uh,
Okay, who is just speaking now?
This is Melissa, and I will talk to the challenge that you were feeling with part one.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I just want
Uh,
to say one thing to you, Melissa.
yeah.
It's Barbara,
Hi,
and the
Barbara.
three of us, we made a decision that we weren't going to express any sorrows or bad feelings we have. And so we went right into the best self, and we helped each other hugely, three strangers in about 4 minutes, by going into your suggestions of your best self and how you would be. And that was it. I said I'm going to put little posters around my whole house of my best self, because listening to them and listening to myself, I already feel better.
That's how this works, and what you've allowed yourself to do. And Vittorio Gallese, who talks about mirror neurons, his work shares some of the neurological underpinning of what I'm about to describe. That is that you have actually, during that best self mirroring that you pursued intuitively and discovered sensorily, using sense metaphor, inside your body, you had the experience of that best self. You weren't just imagining it, you were actually experiencing it. And wonderful to put those post-it notes everywhere, because now you can go back to those images and your body remembers having felt better. And it's easier to get back to those feelings, just very much like the little image that I shared of the hillside. Once you've seen through that metaphoric revision and felt your better self, it's easier to get back there, which is where you'll be now, holding on
Well,
to that.
you are Melissa. You're really special. You're very special.
Thank you. That's very
I have
kind.
to say that I've never experienced this before in a class with you. This is good. This is very rich and very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's the point. And so it's really so satisfying to hear you say that. Thank you.
Melissa, can you also talk about how we can take this into an area of our life like you did with me? I thought that was very interesting.
What the third phase of this? First, we look at where we are. What we did today was look at where we are and where we want to move to from where we are, kind of like in a map. You've got to know your point of departure before you can figure out how you're going to get to your destination. What we can do now with what you all just created, your mirrors, is find clues within them to how you might pin some of these metaphoric qualities that you discovered to the actual facts and details of your life. Caroline shared a wonderful mirror with us during the breakout. The animal that she was representing right now was a squirrel, and her best self was more like an eel. And we were wondering where in her life that eel might be the most effective mover. So this can become your revision can become a problem-solving tool, can become a signpost or a set of signposts for you to look how to begin practically implementing these new feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I just want to put a few things in the chat. There's some upcoming programs that we have. And Melissa, we were talking about doing a part 3. If anyone is interested in doing that, do you want to mention a little bit about that?
Yeah, the part 3 would be what we were just talking about, really using what we just created as a problem solver, discovering the ways in which this can become not just emotionally resonant, but also a practical tool. And that would be part 3. It'll be a 90-minute workshop. And Caroline, I think you and I haven't yet decided the details of that, but anyone who's interested in our setting up such a thing can
let us know.
Express that. Let Caroline know. I'm sure you have a way to be in touch with her. On the slide that's up there beside my little circle is my address at my website, Melissa Johnson.
Excuse me, this is Barbara, but I don't
Hi,
have
Barbara.
a computer now, and I'm on the phone. Can I have a phone number where I can reach you and Caroline so I definitely want to become part of what you're talking about for part 3?
We will, Barbara, if you stay on with the Positive Psychology Hour, if you keep coming, we will be announcing it at that time. I'll make sure that everyone on this gets that, so we can do that. And I can give you my number
could you
at
please?
work. 646-505. Everyone, I'm putting in the chat.
Wait, say that again.
646-505-4406 is my number at the JCC, and you can leave me a message there and how I can contact you if you are not already on our Positive Psychology Hour. You guys, thank you to Melissa from, calling in all the way from Genoa and for presenting this amazing work. We've had just some incredible presenters. Thank you, Phoebe, for curating this. We're going to be able to have an amazing 2022, and I hope you all will keep coming. I'm going to put in the chat the Positive Psychology Hour so you can keep signing up for the next one. Next week we have an incredible lineup. I'm going to put this in. This is for Jordan is back. We're going to be doing lots of exciting things. So stay tuned. All right. And Melissa, be well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm